Sad Self-Portrait, 1976, Oil on Canvas. Welcome to this online tour of the exhibition John Bellany, A Life in Self-Portraiture at City Art Centre. John Bellany's work is also part of the City Art Centre's collection. John Bellany was one of the most significant Scottish artists of the 20th and early 21st centuries. Born into a family of boat builders and fishermen in the small coastal village of Portseaton near Edinburgh in 1942, his upbringing within this community and the Calvinist teachings he heard weekly at church had a profound and lasting impact on his life and work. Self-Portrait with Drawing for The Obsession, 1966, Pencil on Paper. This exhibition focuses on Bellany's use of self-portraiture and how he constantly returned to it throughout his life. It's not known definitively how many self-portraits Bellany produced, but he has to be amongst the most prolific exponents in the history of Western art. A Life in Self-Portraiture brings together over 80 of these autobiographical works, spanning 52 years, from 1961 until 2013, the year of the artist's death. They range from early art school sketches, Self-Portrait, 1963, Pencil on Paper, to his self-depictions as animals and other creatures in large-scale epic paintings. The exhibition showcases the breadth of media used by Bellany, including paintings, drawings, and various printmaking techniques. The Burden, 1970, Etching on Paper, as well as a selection of the artist's sketchbooks, which we are delighted to be showing publicly for the first time. John Bellany, left, and Sandy Moffat, Princes Street, Edinburgh, 1961. Bellany enrolled at Edinburgh College of Art in October 1960. As a schoolboy in Portseaton, he was, by all accounts, a quiet and conscientious pupil. But Art College and Edinburgh expanded his worldview. He became outgoing and boisterous, with a bawdy sense of humour, given to the bohemian way of life. Especially in his appearance. "Look at me, I'm an artist," was his message. It was at this point he painted his first self-portraits, almost as if his new identity had to be recorded and celebrated. Inspired by study visits to the Scottish National Gallery, and by the early poetry in Scots of Hugh MacDiarmid He positioned himself as part of a northern tradition of European art. Drawing in Tuileries, Paris, 1963. In the spring of 1963, he travelled to Paris on an Easter scholarship and was bowled over by the great machines of Delacroix and Courbet in the Louvre. Thereafter, the concept of an art of grandeur began to take shape. John was fearless and supremely self-confident, and with his great friend Alexander Moffat, staged an open-air exhibition during the 1963 Festival exhibition at Castle Terrace. Moffat and Bellany, A Kind of Realism, Edinburgh Festival, 1965. They would go on to stage 2 more festival exhibitions in 1964 and 1965. On the Railings exhibition, Edinburgh Festivals, 1965. Proactively at the Mound opposite the Royal Scottish Academy, and Bellany revelled in the ensuing furore. Self-Portrait, 1965, Oil on Board. Self-Portrait sums up his entire period at ECA and reveals a young artist at the top of his game. Portraying himself in the self-imagined role of the heroic worker/artist. Bellany, at 23 years old, is costumed in fisherman's gear and towers above the Lilliputian figures and boats in the harbour below. He captures himself as the larger-than-life art student, fierce in his fisherman's jumper and sheepskin jacket. And even fiercer in his life force, ready to take on the world. Bellany in London, 1970. In the autumn of 1965, Bellany moved to London to study at the Royal College of Art. Unafraid of new challenges and competition, moving to London was a necessary step if he was to achieve his ambitions as an artist. He immediately embraced London as a city of opportunity and intellectual stimulus that allowed frequent visits to great museums and art galleries, theatres and cinemas, providing the cultural nourishment he craved. During his Royal College years, he lived life to the full, his days centred around hard work in the studio, and in the evenings, keeping convivial company, where his sense of fun and boisterous behaviour soon became legendary. Whilst in London, Bellany's paintings remained resolutely Scottish. Although he realised acceptance by an art world centred in London was unlikely, he was determined to stay put and battle it out. Self-Portrait, 1966, Oil on Board. The Self-Portrait of 1966 demonstrates his increasing mastery as a painter. He stands tall, brush in hand, at work on his large painting, The Star of Bethlehem, now in the Tate. This self-portrait captures Bellany making his presence felt as a Scottish painter in London, and serves as a riposte to the fashionable posturing of his fellow students. Buchenwald, 1967. In 1967, Bellany travelled to Germany, visiting many of the historic centres of German culture. Halle, Weimar, Dresden, Leipzig, and Berlin. A visit to the former Nazi concentration camp at Buchenwald was a life-changing experience for Bellany. That such evil had taken place during his lifetime shook him to the core. The Calvinist view that human beings are basically sinful now seemed vindicated. After Buchenwald, there could no longer be any certainties. Homage to John Knox, 1969, Oil on Board. Homage to John Knox is his first triptych that fully utilises the concept of 3 distinct panels combining to present a complex narrative where Calvinism and Buchenwald collide in a tumultuous vision of hell on earth. The left panel depicts marriage as a prison imposed by the church. The couple are chained together, the wife naked, the husband in the stripped uniform of a concentration camp prisoner. 3 priest-like figures guard the bed, bearing symbols of marriage: a baby, a phallic fish, and a Bible. The right panel shows the day of judgment. The dead rise from their graves to be judged for their sins. One already in the air and seemingly condemned to the eternal fires of hell. Bellany depicts himself in the foreground, with a naked young woman at his side, struggling to escape. In contrast, the central panel depicts 3 men in a boat, a nod back to his ancestral roots, on a becalmed sea, but even they seem doomed. An owl and a raven, symbols of darkness, perch on the heads of 2 of the men. The third man sits hidden behind the mask of a skate. The religious symbolism of this trio is emphasised by a bat hovering over the central figure. The elements one finds in a medieval altarpiece are evoked, then subverted. As Bellany battles against the Calvinist teachings of his youth. Self-Portrait with Juliet, 1979, Oil on Canvas. By the late 1970s, Bellany's drinking was becoming a serious problem, affecting terribly his personal and family life. Despite this, he worked like a man possessed, pouring out a stream of paintings, which are now considered amongst his greatest achievements. Expressionism was taken to extremes. Paint was spilled onto the canvas like blood. The highly personal subject matter, the gambler dicing with death or succumbing to temptation, and the recurring image of the ticking clock combine to portray a man at the end of his tether. Self-Portraiture for Bellany now transcends the conventions of an observed version of the artist at his easel. Instead, self-portraiture becomes omnipresent and assumes extraordinary forms and disguises. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, the wild period, all is laid bare in an agonising series of self-portraits where he casts himself as a lobster, skate, monkey, dog, or puffin, and where the tragic implications of his life are made visible. Embarking upon a phantasmagorical meditation on his identity, he sought not only to explore his own predicament, but to grapple with the mysteries of human existence. Self-Portrait with Razor Shell, 1976, oil on canvas. In Self-Portrait with Razor Shell, from 1976, he is seen as an isolated and lonely figure on the edge of the sea. Accompanied by ominous dog, cat, and sea creature companions. The concepts of guilt and death deeply embedded since his church-going youth. Combined with classical myth, superstition, and a sense of the precariousness and mystery of life, rampaged through his dreams and nightmares. Here they make a creeping appearance in daylight, lurking in the margins and on the peripheries. Bellany was also a gifted musician who played both piano and accordion, and whose performances made him the life and soul of many a party. The Pianist, 1983, oil on canvas. In The Pianist, he sits alone at the keyboard, barely able to play. Huge brush strokes and flurries of paint predominate and almost engulf the pianist. One feels Bellany's Faustian pact with alcohol is no longer able to hold. St Thomas's Hospital, London, 1987. Watercolour on paper. By the mid-1980s, Bellany's health began to fail, and he spent time in various hospitals. In 1988, his condition became critical. He was admitted to Edinburgh Hospital in Cambridge, where he underwent a liver transplant. He, and many around him, believed that he was on the brink of death, with Bellany later remarking that death touched my cheek. Death touched my shoulder. 1985, pencil on paper. Remarkably, however, not only did he pull through, but he was drawing and painting again within hours of the operation, creating a remarkable series of drawings and watercolours documenting his slow and painful recovery. After that, Bellany was a changed man. Birthday Self-Portrait, 1993, oil on canvas. For an artist, a journey into the abyss can bring special insights. Now in his late 40s, and acutely aware of how close to death he had come, the emphasis and focus of his life and work shifted. He wrote from hospital that it was essential to live for art. Art is life. Before adding, colour was so important. Recovery and redemption were uppermost in his mind, as he embarked upon a series of paintings based on the Prometheus legend. Prometheus III, 1988, oil on canvas. Prometheus, who, for his sins, was chained to a rock and had his liver endlessly savaged by an eagle sent by the avenging Zeus. Once again, Bellany revealed his unique ability to personalise classical myth to telling effect, by assuming the Promethean role and imposing his own appropriate punishment. In these paintings, the tormentor of his alcohol-ravaged liver is transformed into his own symbolic alter ego, the puffin doppelganger. Consequently, through this very personal take on the Promethean myth, Bellany lays bare the self-destructive nature of his suicidal drinking and its inevitable patriarchal punishment. Using bright, primary colours, Bellany also renders himself with a double-faced Janus head, another symbolic facet of his work at this time, marking the crossroads of his life between a troubled past and a potentially more optimistic future. Bellany painting Moffat, Barga, Italy, 2002. After the successful transplant, Bellany was granted another 25 years of life, as well as a drastic change in his lifestyle and outlook. This period also saw a marked change in the fortunes of his career. He received widespread critical acknowledgement, public honours, and acclaim. The final decade of Bellany's life saw him acquire a large house in Barga, northern Tuscany, a village dubbed the most Scottish town in Italy due to its historical connection with Bellany's homeland. This late period saw the continued exploration with colour and the sensuous use of paint. It also saw his long drawn-out and final illness, although his spirit remained undimmed and his will to paint persisted right up until the end. His final work contained a series of mature statements on the finality of life that are touchingly human. Nowhere better demonstrated than in Bellany at 70, one of his last self-portraits. Bellany at 70, 2012, oil on canvas. Keeping up the tradition of painting a self-portrait on his birthday, Bellany rose to the occasion on his 70th birthday in June 2012. Though his eyesight was failing, he persevered and completed with uncompromising honesty a painting that occupies a unique place within his body of self-portraiture. Although the theme of mortality runs through his work from beginning to end, the fearful morbidity and judgmental visions of his early work have all but disappeared. And we recognise in the luminosity and open spaces of his later work a profound veneration for life. Bellany's mature statements on the finality of life are touchingly human. Nowhere is this better demonstrated than in his 70th birthday self-portrait, where all past rhetoric has been swept aside, leaving us simply with a moving description of human frailty. Sketchbook 1. Like many artists, Bellany was a passionate user of sketchbooks and notebooks. He used them to record personal thoughts and memos, hold photographs and clippings, and for a multitude of sketched observations and preparatory drawings. Sketchbook 2. Together, they represent an intimate diary of an individual, a unique insight into the inner workings of a curious mind, and in many ways provide the most complete self-portrait of a creative practice. Sketchbook 3. In this exhibition, we are exhibiting a selection of Bellany's sketchbooks for the very first time. In the Studio, Clapham Common, London, 1980s. John Bellany, A Life in Self-Portraiture, captures the span of an extraordinary life and career, told through the lens of the artist's own eyes and the words of the people who knew him best. By using his own image to capture his autobiographical and psychological experiences, Bellany has not only left a visual record of himself through the different stages of his life, but also allows us the opportunity to contemplate various aspects of our own common humanity and emotional selves. Bellany loved life and living and laughter. All of that within his being is in the paintings and in the self-portraits. Self-Portrait in Chair, 2013, oil on canvas. John Bellany, A Life in Self-Portraiture, is at City Arts Centre, Edinburgh, from 31st of May until 28th September 2025. For further information about our venues, exhibitions and events, visit our website, edinburghmuseums.org.uk. Follow us on X at EdinCulture, Instagram, Museums and Galleries Edinburgh, or on our 3 Facebook pages, City Arts Centre, Lauriston Castle, and Museums and Galleries Edinburgh. Produced by Magic Egg Productions.